Some philosophers think objects are physical nodules of events, like oranges or apples from a Cézanne. When I look at my sculptures, I don't divorce them as objects from events in my life. How is everybody? Good? Great. So it's been really great for me to have the opportunity to do the third installation of the work. This is the first sculpture I ever made. This, I remember, began upright, like a column, and a bunch of rods coming off of it. And then I pulled it, and it held. And I started pulling rods off of it until it slipped. There's 4 rods because it took exactly 4 rods structurally to hold it like this. I thought of sculpture as a behavior, and I thought of the finished work as like a punctuation mark in my behavior. When I was younger, in a certain sense, I didn't know what was going on except this. You know, sculpture I could go to, you know, girls were hard for me, you know, presenting myself in public was difficult, but this I could go to and I could, you know, present the sculptures as almost a figurative substitute for myself.
So let's talk a bit about Anthony Caro, because he was such a big influence.
So I talked in my career, especially when I was younger, a lot about Caro, just to re-emphasize the formality that I was working with. Some of the sculptures hold this really rigid rules of a rigid formality. I didn't invent that. I mean, it was of the time. I was doing these kind of sculptures where everything was propped and leaned and falling over. I think this probably started out that way. And I remember I was using C-clamps instead of welding to hold things together and was balancing things. This is just balance there. It's a whole moment of connection.
What's happened with these different rotations of your work is that there's always one work that stays from the previous presentation, and the one that stayed is the box.
The show was somehow built around that this was going to be the one left. The bottom of the box is just enough deeper than the floor that you might miss it. The floor is cut to accommodate this. Any deeper, it would be obvious, and any less deep, you wouldn't be able to see it. I've always thought of it as a thought in a box, how thought could displace the physical world. You know, this being the most recent piece made out of paper, handmade paper, rather than paper mache. I use my own body in all of the body pieces. So it's me, but it's not a portrait of me. It's about an internal structure that I feel externalized. It's ultimately not important that it is me, though the sculpture couldn't be made if I did it with you.
Yes.
Because then it would be a portrait.
Yes.
Then people would say, or could say, oh, you know, he sees a paperness in Emily and he depicted her out of focus. Things distill in my mind for a long time. I think that took 5 or 6, 7 years to make. I was reading the neoclassic Roman philosopher, Plotino, and he had a book called Return to the One, and he was talking about going back into oneself, circling back till you eventually come to the kind of oneness. I made it during the Trump primary and his cascade into indecency. So I was trying to track in an abstract way of personal upsetness inside me. There's very quiet aspects, my hands, gravity, the physicality of it. It's very appropriate that the paper is fragile. It has kind of absolute presence we have as people, but at the same time, we're also friggin' fragile. It's really nice to, to see them differently, cycling back into my life. I think they sing together as a group. Having them here working like events and active in the moment, brings them back into the present for me.